Hello dear friend, welcome to my channel. Watercolor paper is one of the main tools for any artist who wants to create watercolor paintings. But with so many different types of paper available, it can be tough to know where to start. In this tutorial, I'll show you the types of watercolor paper. I'll discuss their properties and how to choose the right watercolor paper or sketchbook for your needs. In this demonstration, I will test 12 brands of watercolor paper and I'll show you how each of them performed. I will apply paints using wet on dry and wet on wet techniques. I will also show you what happens when I soften edges, apply expressive strokes, and scrub the paint from the surface of each of this paper. I will also share with you some of my tips on how I choose and use my sketchbooks and watercolor paper in general. So, without further ado, let's dive right in. If you are new here, welcome to my channel. I'm Elnora Koldayeva and I'm a self-taught watercolor artist. I am so glad you are here and I'm very excited to share my love for watercolor painting with all of you. First, please allow me to tell you my story. I fell in love with watercolors about 15 years ago when I was working as a nurse in critical care unit. Watercolors gave me peace and much needed respite from long shifts at the hospital. When I was just starting out with watercolors, I felt clueless about the medium, about everything really, such as brushes, paper, and paints. So in my tutorials, I'm sort of taking a trip down memory lane to help myself and you navigate the wonderful world of watercolors. I hope you find them helpful in your journey too. Together, we'll explore the all-important part in watercolor painting, and it is the choice of watercolor paper. There is a wide range of watercolor paper out there, and you may be wondering what paper should you choose. When I choose watercolor paper, I look at its weight. The weight of the paper refers to how heavy the paper is, and it is typically measured in pounds or grams per square meter. The heavier the paper is, the more water it can withstand without buckling. For beginners, a medium-weight paper of 140 pounds is usually sufficient. Also, when I'm choosing watercolor paper, I'm looking at its texture. There are 3 distinct paper surfaces you could choose from. Hot-pressed, also known as HP, which has very smooth surface and it's perfect for precise work such as botanicals and pen and wash. There are also a cold-pressed paper, which is slightly textured, and a rough paper. I will talk about each one of them in depth later in this lesson. At the beginning of this example, I show that I'm about to paint on a hot-pressed 140 pounds cotton paper by fluid. Let me tell you a little bit about hot-pressed paper in general. This type of paper is a popular choice among artists who prefer to work on a smooth surface, who uses pen and wash techniques, and the ones who prefer a surface that dries quickly, which makes it suitable for creating sharper edges and cleaner lines. You can see how I couldn't soften the edge with water on this gray stroke as it dried almost immediately after I applied the pigment. I also noticed how pigments look much more vibrant on a hot-pressed surface, as it does not absorb much of it. Thanks to this quality, it is easier to lift paints from its surface, especially when you use non-staining colors. The one downside of using hot-pressed paper is that when you try to lift pigments from the surface, the friction lifts up the paper fibers. You can see the lint-like balls that were created even with the mild scrubbing. Overall, hot-pressed paper by fluid is a great choice for artists who prefer to work on a smooth, hot-pressed surface. Now I'm moving on to testing Mixed Media Sketchbook by Stillman and Brin. This book in particular is from Beta series. I'm not sure if it still exists on the market now, as I bought it many years ago. This paper weighs 180 pounds. It is cold pressed and suitable for both wet and dry media. As I lay pigments on its surface, it feels much like a hot pressed paper. The edges are crisp and precise and the colors look vibrant. At the same time, it has a slight texture to it, which gives it a feel of a cold pressed paper. Stillman and Brin offer a series of sketchbooks suitable for various media. Alpha series, for example, is good for dry media such as graphite, charcoal, pencils, and ink. Gamma series is ivory-colored surface, which gives it a warm feel and it's suitable for dry media as well. Delta series, on the other hand, has a heavyweight paper, which is ideal for watercolors, gouache, and acrylic. I wanted to try Delta series one day. Look what happens when I soften the edge of the stroke with the wet brush. The surface allows for watercolor flow, and that's one of the things that differ this paper from a hot-pressed paper. As with previous example, the paper surface lifts with the slide scrubbing. I wonder how it is when you work with Delta series by Stillman and Brin. If you worked with Beta or Delta series, please share your experiences in the comments below. Let's move on to Visual Journal by Statmore. It is a 140 pounds cold-pressed paper, which is excellent for watercolor and collage. It is also good for acrylic, pen and ink, pencil and markers. The paper is acid-free, which will help preserve your works for many years. I often recommend this paper to my students, and I even got a few for my little one. I think it is pretty versatile when it comes to using water media, and most importantly, it is fairly affordable. I started to paint using watercolors on Visual Journal books and was not too afraid of using it as opposed to the ones that are much pricier. When I apply watercolors on its surface, they don't lose too much of their vibrancy. Colors tend to blend well when I paint using wet on dry and wet on wet techniques, and softening the edge is a bliss. I love how easily pigment flows on its surface. When I applied gestural strokes with a calligraphy brush, I was able to get smooth effects as well as broken down effect, as if I was painting on a textured surface. When time came to scrubbing the surface, I noticed that the paper fibers get quite disturbed by it, and I ended up with paper clumps. This is something you want to keep in mind. If you're looking for an affordable watercolor paper to start your practice with, Visual Journal will be a good choice for you. Let's talk about another watercolor sketchbook that became one of my favorites. Etchr seems to be like a perfect sketchbook for me. Its high-quality paper and durable construction can handle any medium I throw at it. The paper is made of 100% cotton and it is cold-pressed, which gives it a slightly textured surface that is ideal for pencils, inks, pastels, watercolors, and other media. The paper is also acid-free. It has landscape format, which gives me plenty of space to work on. And the convenient construction ensures that the book will open and lay flat, and I can easily work on it no matter the position. The colors tend to stay vibrant. I think this is due to its internal and external sizing. Sizing is a process of coating paper with a substance that makes it more water resistant, helps paint to blend more easily and not to bleed through the paper. I also noticed that the paint dries pretty fast on this surface, and pigments tend to stick on the paper so that it makes it hard to lift the pigments. However, after I scrub the paper surface, the friction does not disturb the paper fibers themselves, which is a plus. Now I'm moving on to Moleskine Sketchbook. It is a popular choice among artists, graphic designers, and architects. I bought mine 10 years ago and only used a few times. It has a smooth surface and it can handle a variety of media, including pencils, pens, markers, and watercolors. It comes in a variety of sizes and colors and has hardcover and elastic closure. I like that I can open it fully and use in different positions. The paper in this sketchbook feels like a hot-pressed one. However, it still has a slight texture to it. If you're looking for a high-quality sketchbook for your watercolor paintings, Moleskine might be a good choice for you. The paper is thick and durable, and it can handle a lot of water. It is, however, on a pricier side. After playing a little bit with the surface, I was surprised by how easily the pigments flow on this paper and how even the coverage is. I feel like I'll be coming back to using this sketchbook in the future. Unlike hot press paper, Moleskine paper tends to hold onto pigments and it's hard to lift them by scrubbing. I was surprised to see though that after all this scrubbing, the surface of the paper was not disturbed. Overall, Moleskine sketchbooks are a good choice for people who prefer to work on smooth surface and who work using mixed media. Next comes the sketchbook that I really like. It is made by Handbook. You can see that I ran out of pages in this book and had to show you an example on a marked page. I made a number of watercolor sketches in it, and I liked most of them. The sketchbook is made of 140 pounds cold pressed watercolor paper. The surface feels thick, durable, and velvety soft at the same time. Pages allow for blending and can handle quite a bit of water and multiple layers of watercolors. Look how pigments granulate on its surface. It is fascinating to see the difference the paper surface can make when it comes to watercolor painting. Overall, Handbook watercolor sketchbook is of a great quality and it is very reliable. This sketchbook gave me a wonderful opportunity for exploring watercolors and expressing my creativity. Before I move on to testing another paper, I wanted to thank you for supporting my work by visiting my channel and watching my tutorials. I pour my heart and soul into producing these lessons. This is how much I love watercolors and very excited to share my knowledge with you. Please share your stories about your artistic journey with me if you'd like in the comment section below. I would love to hear from you. A few days ago, I learned that the Field Book by Pentalic is no longer available for purchase via popular retailers. There are alternatives available by Pentalic, however, and I'm yet to test them. This Field Book has 140 pounds cold pressed paper, which is acid-free. Because this paper is cold pressed, I can feel a slight texture on its surface. Cold pressed paper is also known as knot. Knot stands for not hot pressed. This type of paper is made of using specific printmaking process, which makes this paper slightly textured. Such surface strikes a balance between smooth and rough surfaces. It captures watercolor pigments and brushstrokes in a unique way, adding depth and character to an artwork. As you can see, I could use various techniques on this surface. Pigments flow easily, there is a variation to my strokes using a calligraphy brush, and the surface got only mildly disturbed by scrubbing. Overall, this sketchbook is durable, has thick paper, and it comes in wire-bound binding, which makes it easy to turn pages when you are working on the go. If you use Sketchbook by Pentalic, please let me know when do you use them and how do you like them. Let's move on to the Fontaine Sketchbook, which has an extra rough surface. I'm not even sure if such paper is sold in the US, as I purchased it during my last trip to Turkey. And this paper has an unusual pattern-like texture. It feels rough to touch as well. I think this paper will be ideal for painting landscapes and seascapes. The paper is fairly absorbent and is made of 100% cotton. It is acid-free and weighs 140 pounds, which is ideal for any artist, especially those who love to work with unique textures. For beginners, it may be challenging to work on extra rough surfaces, as it may be hard to create smooth blends and precise shapes. The paper in this sketchbook has an intentionally rough surface. I see pronounced bumps and grooves on it. The surface allows the pigments to pool, granulate, and create interesting effects on the paper. I noticed though that colors lose a bit of their vibrancy after they dry, so I need to keep this in mind and remember to load my brush with more saturated colors when I paint on this surface. Now I would like to tell you about watercolor paper that comes in blocks. More and more artists gravitate towards using watercolor blocks because they are convenient and portable. There is no need to tape or stretch such paper. Artwork and paper remain well preserved within a block, and solid construction provides a stable surface when painting. There are several watercolor papers that stood out the test of times. One of them is Fabriano Artistica. It is a renowned brand in the world of watercolor papers, and their cold pressed watercolor paper is an excellent one. It is made of 100% cotton. It is cold pressed and provides balanced surface that is neither too smooth nor too rough. This means that such surface allows for controlled washes, precise details, as well as texture effects. Cold pressed watercolor paper block has good absorbency and allows paper to hold water and pigments effectively. That means the colors will remain vibrant and I could create smooth washes and blending of colors. Also, I learned that I can make precise works on this surface and achieve a broken brush stroke effect with my calligraphy brush, thanks to the slight texture of the surface. Fabriano makes various paper surfaces, including hot pressed and rough. I just happen to have cold pressed watercolor block. As you can see, this paper holds on to brown matter color, and it was hard to scrub it off. I was glad to see that the paper surface withstood the scrubbing test. I think with this paper block you can confidently explore your creativity with watercolors. For the next example, I chose Etchr's 140 pounds cotton paper block. Many of you probably heard about Etchr's paper by now. Etchr has a long history dating back to 1492, making it one of the oldest paper mills in Europe. Over the centuries, they have perfected their paper-making techniques and gained trust among watercolor communities worldwide. This paper is made of 100% cotton fibers, which contributes to its strength, durability, and ability to withstand watercolor medium. While primarily designed for watercolor painting, Etchr's paper can also be used with other wet and dry media such as gouache, ink, pencils, and pastels. It is versatile. Nature allows artists to explore different techniques and experiment with mixed media applications. You can see how my brush skips over the grooves of this rough surface. While testing this paper, I imagined how I could paint sunlit landscapes or cityscapes on this surface, where such skipped areas could represent light. Also, lifting of the pigment was a breeze, and the paper surface remained undisturbed. Overall, artists can rely on the quality of such paper. For some, however, the cost of Etchr's paper is restrictive. Now let's talk about the paper which is more affordable and offers an alternative to more expensive watercolor papers. Baohong watercolor paper gained much popularity over the past few years. This particular paper block is made of 100% cotton. It weighs 140 pounds and has medium texture to it, meaning that it is cold pressed. Such texture strikes a balance between softness and grain, allowing for controlled brushstrokes and adding depth at the same time. Like many other quality watercolor paper, Baohong paper has sizing that lets colors to stay vibrant, meaning the sizing layer resists the sinking of pigments into paper fibers. You can see how I effortlessly used wet on dry and wet on wet techniques, made a sweeping stroke while the grooves let me skip some areas of the paper. This paper can handle a variety of techniques and help artists to get creative and use other wet and dry media on this paper. I like the fact that Baohong paper is available in various sizes and textures. I have large sheets of cold-pressed and rough paper by them. Whether I decide to paint on a large scale or carry the small watercolor paper pad, when I travel, Baohong have it all. You may also try their Academy line, which is slightly more affordable. Finally, I wanted to show you how toned handmade paper by Khadi performs. I have natural white watercolor paper by this brand for many years now and grew to love it as it has very unusual texture. I find that such surface adds more depth to my paintings. Having said that, this paper is hard to work with and you may need some time to get used to it. I never used their toned paper line though. Let's see how it behaves when I apply watercolors. As you can see, the sizing on this paper is very resistant and water does not permeate paper fibers easily, which can feel unsettling. I feel like I'm trying to apply paint on an oiled surface. Another thing to consider is before you try painting on a toned paper, you should try their natural white line first and get the feel for it. Toned paper may limit your color range. Some hues may not appear as vibrant or true to their original shade. This requires adjustment in your color choices. Overall, Khadi paper is of high quality. It is made of 100% cotton and it is handmade. Once you learn to work with it, it may surprise you with its depth and unusual character. The surface of this paper, though, is easily lifted by scrubbing. This is something to keep in mind when you choose to paint on this paper. With these words, I want to conclude my lesson, where we learned that the type of watercolor paper you use can have a big impact on the look and feel of your painting. Hot pressed paper is smooth and ideal for creating detailed paintings, while cold pressed paper has a slight texture and is good for creating painting with lots of movement. And rough paper has a pronounced texture and is good for creating paintings with a lot of character. I hope this lesson has given you a better understanding of watercolor paper. Please watch my other tutorials and subscribe to my channel for more videos like this. Thank you for watching.